We will start with a presentation from our city manager, Jerome Fletcher, about growth and how to pay for it. There will be some time after his presentations for your questions. If you have a question or comment, there are two ways to communicate with us. You can raise your hand or use the chat box. You can use the raise your hand feature to indicate that you have a question or a comment. To do this, locate the raise hand button on the bottom of your Zoom window. Click on it and we will see your hand raised. We will then call on you at the appropriate time for you to unmute and speak. Alternatively, you can type in your question or comment into the chat box. The chat box is located at the bottom of your Zoom window as well. Simply type your message and we'll address it as soon as possible. Please note that the chat will be monitored by a moderator who will ensure that all questions are addressed in a timely manner. Feel free to use whichever method you feel comfortable with. Now, without further delay, I'd like to introduce our city manager, Jerome Fletcher. After his presentation, we'll open the floor for questions and comments. Jerome?
Thank you, Jane. That was great. I appreciate that. Good afternoon. Welcome to everyone, all of our department leadership and our team, as well as our visitors and our community and citizens. We're grateful to have you here today. As I share my screen, we're going to talk about what this year's budget looks like, some challenges of it. This specific topic today is growth and how growth pays for growth. But as we begin, just a brief reminder that we use an outcome-based budgeting format, which is performance-based. So we kind of define the outcomes that we want through the commission, through the strategic plan and the pillars. We determine how much they cost and what does it mean to provide them. We identify resources that can hopefully cover the cost of what we're providing. And then we sort of look at the funding gaps, and then we confer with the commission to figure out how we're going to pick and choose what we're going to adopt and implement. And that's sort of the process that we go through right now. We're in the information gathering phase, not only from the community, but from our department heads on their needs and what they think their next year will look like, and operating under some strict parameters as we go through it. But that's how we begin the process. So, community budget meeting, growth and how to pay for it. Today is April 16th. The first slide talks about the actual changes in fund balance for a 3-year review. A couple of things I want to point out to you here is, one, the general fund is our main fund as it relates to the services we provide you. There are other special funds that are very narrowly focused or specified for a different department or purpose. But the general fund is the one that you think of when you think of what does your government provide you and how does your taxpayer, your property tax flow into the budget. The road and drainage district collects, and the fire districts and the building fund, they all collect fees and assessments at various times. And as you can see, the numbers in these balances and the imbalances mainly are on the rise. And that's because of our growth and what has happened in the city over the last few years. But when you talk about what happened over the last few years, you come over to the next slide, and you see that the road and drainage district is in the negative by $15 million. And that's for money that we paid out of that particular fund for Hurricane Ian. And we've been reimbursed for some of it, but we still have, I believe, at least 30 million out there still to recover at some point in time. It's a point in time that we do not know, but we actually hopefully think that based on what we've already received, we've gotten some sooner rather than later. So it's been very helpful. In the general fund category, you see the $7.7 million. That is what we have left in the general fund in order to get us through not only this year, but hopefully something we'll build on it next year. To put that in proper perspective, what we've done recently is the commission has given the approval for $4 million of that money, of the 7.7, to be used towards finishing the design work for the police headquarters, if that sort of triggers it to you to connect one dot to the other dot. The general fund, the ad valorem assumptions have to be sort of flexible right now at this point in time. So we're estimating an increase of 7.5%. I believe last year that number came in at about 10%, which was still closer than our average, but it was still higher than traditional years based on the market that sort of went hot and then it went cool. And I would say it's probably still cooling, but we still should hopefully get an increase in that one that will help us balance our budget. It's desperately needed. 96.5 collection rate is very good. With these assumptions, the millage rate that we currently have of 3.67667 will bring in an additional $2.3 million in next year's budget, which sounds great. All funds, we use this thing small. Okay, there we go. Use a utility factor of 3.5% for salary growth of existing levels and service. Our contracts are being negotiated right now. I think the PBA is almost complete, and the fire is going to resume soon. The ASME will be budgeted the same as non-union employees, and the salary growth of 2.5% for cost of living, the CPI adjustment for existing levels of service and personnel is included in there as well. The cost impacts with our capital projects, the ongoing staffing and operating costs and maintenance, that has a different sort of connotation this year. We are now at the point where our team has alerted us that the inspections of the buildings that we were waiting on has been completed, and the total amount of that is in approximately $8 million. And in paying for those capital projects improvements, I'm speaking specifically of Hurricane Ian, we have to pay for it first and then get reimbursed through insurance and FEMA at a later point in time. So those numbers are going to cause us to have to pivot on the money that we do have in order to prioritize and phase in those improvements sooner rather than later. Because to put it in a proper context, if we had a storm tomorrow and there was new damage, the FEMA and insurance would not pay you for the new damage because you didn't fix the old damage. So we've got to make sure that we prioritize fixing our facilities as soon as possible. And I'm thankful for our team for having to get us that information in recent days. Our general fund changes, you see a total of $5.4 million. The increase of $2.3 million on the other page, like I said, that was great, but it's not enough because our merit increases, our CPI adjustment, health insurance, and inflation of operating costs total more than that. So these are some of the main cost drivers that are in the general fund and things that we have to allow for and things that we have to solve for. Our priorities and our pillars, this is what guides us. Our commission has done a great job of outlining those. They will actually meet on tomorrow, I think it is, to sort of refine and finalize their priorities with our strategic planning leader, Doug Thomas. And once they have those finalized, we just use those to bake those into how do we balance this budget. If it's an outcome-based budget, then you figure out what's the most important and you allocate dollars there. And as we start talking about what are we going to save and what are we going to shave off, then we go to the priorities that are less important to the commission and we talk about them there. This way of budgeting is different than just going line item by line item, which takes a lot more time and doesn't really get you to accomplish on what really matters the most. And it also leads to lower quality decision making. So we want to keep our board and ourselves in those meetings at high levels of what they want to achieve, and then we are set out to achieve that task. When you look at this slide, this shows all funds by pillar. So as you look at it, you can see that more than not, you see infrastructure and facilities, 40%, and you see safe community at 31%. Those are our two biggest chunks of the pie. We have to take care of our buildings and infrastructure, and we have to be safe in this community. No one's going to want to be here. I know we're one of the top growing cities in the country, but if we don't maintain these two pillars, everything else will literally crumble around us. So that's why they're so important. But you will also see that over the years, in the last couple of years especially, you know, the economic development and the environmental resiliency and sustainability pillars have grown in fund because we've dedicated resources to those areas. The commission has agreed, and we have done, increased staffing in our economic development division. We also have the natural resource division to help the environmental pillar. So we're making headway, we're making moves, but you know, it can't all be done in 1 year, but I would say that we're making progress. When you look at the general fund itself, you see 45 million or 61% for safe community. Our police force has increased tremendously, and based on the consultant report we got last year, we're scheduled to increase between 16 and 20 positions each year to keep up with the actual growth of the city. The growth of the city has also sparked another conversation about the headquarters with the police, and that's been a very good exchange of the community engagement and feedback process. And we've listened and we've heard, and we'll be bringing some recommendations back to the commission board on April 23rd at 1 p.m. So we're looking forward to that very much. The ULDC update, we've heard a lot about the process. We've heard a lot about why are you doing this and where are you doing this. We're doing this because the code has to be up to date in order to provide the best opportunity for the success you want to attain. If you have a code that's outdated and you're trying to meet your other economic development goals or the growth goals of the city and they're out of alignment, it just makes it impossible to get to where you're trying to go. We've already reviewed several chapters of the ULDC, and chapter 5, which is signs, which was a very highly concerned chapter, will be on April 22nd. So we look forward to that. The natural resources will be presenting to the the City Commission on May the 6th. We will then have the first reading of the companion comprehensive plan amendment in May, and full adoption of the comprehensive plan and ULDC is anticipated at the end of June or beginning of July. And this process has been many years, couple of years in the making, but now finally being able to see the finish line, I think that that's going to help us as we talk about what does this city need going forward. And it's a lot, but I think that these changes and updates of the ULDC, which staff has spent an enormous amount of time on, is going to bring that to light for you. So the need for commercial versus residential taxes, the city needs to improve its commercial rate. Right now, it's just 8%, between 8 and 11. We want it to be between 20 and 30. I love that number. The way that we get there is you might see us and hear us in public, and the commission vote on projects that you say, well, they could have more commercial. When I tell you, and you should know that our team and staff puts that commercial priority above everything, that's true. But we don't shut deals down and walk away and get nothing and leave our city in a worse place by not doing nothing. We get the best deal that we can get. We know where we want to go and we know where we're at. So we stick strong to that, but it's a negotiation process to get what's best for us and what they can live with. So that is not going to change. When you say 90% of our workforce travels outside the city to work, we need to keep those people here. We need to keep those dollars here, that revenue here. And the way that you do that is you bring jobs here. And we're working on bringing more jobs to the city because that's what we need. We have healthcare industry that's booming right now here in the city because of the upcoming hospital. So we're very excited about that. And last, it says the ULDC rewrite proposes to convert single family land into tax producing uses along main road corridors. We've got to better use the space that we have and create sort of walkable places for people that want to be in the city. We think that the Toledo Blade corridor is about to have a huge boom in activity, and there should be a walkable place that will meet that need and show everyone that we care about both sides and all 104 miles of the city. Economic Development Gateway Corridor Study. This is so important. You talk about I-75 in Sumter. We know that a hospital is coming on one corner. We know that we want a large business activity on the other corner. And when we do the study, it's just going to show you exactly what we think that this area could be. And we have to prepare for it. We have to prepare for it now. And that means having all kinds of housing available. We see different housing going up, whether it's workforce, attainable housing, affordable housing. We need the right kind of housing while we still try to make sure that we attract the type of businesses here that brings jobs and keeps revenue in the city. The Activity Center 6 study, this is one that was for I-75 in Yorkshire. It was actually pushed off from 24 to 25 to allow for the other one to be done because the hospital coming over at Sumter is going to come quicker than the development is on I-75 in the Yorkshire Range area. But it would also provide potential land use scenarios and growth and job analysis. And when you hear growth paying for growth, and what we think about it is, well, it should be dollar for dollar. And, why are we behind the curve, so to speak? And some of that is historical. As I mentioned with the ULDC, if it's not written right, you can't build right, and you can't manage the money correctly. Some of it is impact fees that weren't charged as well as they could, as high as they could. And the theory behind that might have been, well, we don't want to charge as high as impact fees as we could because we want to scare people off. Well, now, guess what? Everyone wants to be here. So now we're actually trying to catch up to those impact fees to make sure that we get the most that we can so that we reduce the burden on the citizens and taxpayers. Hospitals and other current efforts, like I said, Sarasota Memorial is going to break ground on both of their sites. They confirmed that they could do 2 at one time, and that is great for us. HCA is breaking ground over in Wallen Park in May. That's going to be exciting. The Acadia Behavioral Healthcare is already underway. You can see some of that activity over off of Toledo Blade. And we're also working on 2 potential commercial entertainment districts along the Toledo Blade corridor. Now, I think Toledo Blade is geographically the center of the city. So when you think about that, wait a minute, it really is? That means there's that much land all around that area. It's super important for us to maximize it and build it into something that people can have a diversity of options to do, whether we're talking about eating, whether we're talking about entertainment, whether we're talking about childcare, whether we're talking about community activities. It's very important. And the model and the vision that we have looks tremendous to bring some well-known places to Toledo Blade, as well as some different sort of shopping opportunities as well. Impact fees, I said a little bit about this earlier. So we began charging full impact fees in 2022. That was not that long ago. There was a lot of, in my opinion, money left on the table. But again, had they charged more, they could have driven more people away, and we may not be in the position that we are in now. So it is what it is. And more importantly, we want to move forward by just making sure that we take care of tomorrow, today, by charging the right thing. Impact fees can only pay for infrastructure improvements that increase capacity, such as widening roads, new lanes, and traffic signals. But they're a big piece of the pie when we talk to developers about what they want to do and what they can do. We have limited borrowing authority, so impact fees allow us to be able to get things done or repay for things that were done, and it works out best for everyone. But it cannot be used for maintenance and operating expenses. So this year on our city manager's considerations, low new employee requests. We had this conversation at the first budget workshop with the commission in mid-March, and they have given a very clear directive. I think last year we had around 50 people that we added, and aside from fire, police, and the Warm Rose Spring staff, it was 7, I believe, and I think 4 of those were needed in HR. So it wasn't great, in my opinion, last year. And this year, I know police is going to be lower than they were last year because they received a grant that helped paid and offset, a COPS grant that helped paid and offset some of their officers, which is greatly appreciated. I think fire has a few, but we have a few that will sort of figure out how we're going to manage them. But the city is not in a place where it can create or bring on new positions for the most part, because it's a challenging year. When you talk about being challenging, I propose that there was an incremental millage rate increase, sort of 2 to 3% over the course of time to sort of get you to where you want to be. But right now, we're in the 4th year of keeping our millage rate the same, and I don't think that's sustainable for the future. And you say, well, why isn't the growth paying for that? Well, the growth pays for it, but it doesn't come in at the same rate that you anticipate for the expenses that you have right now. Our ability to be financially stable is going to be at some point in time. If it's not this year, it may be next year, depending on that millage rate and whether it goes up or down. The ERP that Enterprise Resource Planning System that we're planning for, this is, if you don't know what this is sort of the brains and the central connection of what your technology has for HR, finance, IT. It all works together to to provide the system that we work on a daily basis. Our system is a couple decades old. It results in errors and more manual processes than we would like. We really need to move to something that's more efficient. It's a painful process. It costs a lot of money and it takes a lot of time. It's not something anyone enjoys doing, but we want to be the most efficient government. And if we want to do that, then we have to make sure that we have the right equipment and technology to do so. New police headquarters, may have heard a little bit about that. So touching on that, we are bringing back to the commission on April 23rd at 1 p.m. some recommendations on how we can move forward. We have been talking about this now, especially with the price of it, for about 6 weeks. And we've heard a lot from the public. We've had a town hall. We've heard emails and voice messages. So first of all, we're grateful that everyone, for the most part, supports the police department. We have a top quality department led by Chief Garrison, and we are grateful for their support. But we also heard their feedback. What can you can afford this, or where's your plan, and some other things to that nature, and with a surtax list. And we've heard a lot of good feedback. So we're going to try to provide something that helps us to move forward in the conversation. But at the end of the day, the longer you wait for the headquarters, one, the more it will cost you. And that's just a fact. The Resilient SRQ Grant Infrastructure Program, we are looking to get, hopefully, that's $201 million broken up into different buckets. And the bucket that we recently applied for was for public entity for infrastructure, which we should be able to get a good amount from that based on the damage that we sustained from the hurricane, as well as our connection to the low to moderate income requirement of SRQ as well. So we are exploring that in every way that we can to see what we can get. And I just love to remind everyone that this is federal money coming to us. And while all of our money goes up into the federal government in some shape, form, or fashion, this is not money that came out of our coffers or state coffers, which I think is something that we all have to remember as we're grateful for the opportunity to participate in the program. Financial support to community projects. So the new YCMA building on King Plastics property, I am trying to help them gain financial support through the state and federal levels. Those are options 1 and 2. King Plastic is actually building the actual building on their property. YMCA will run the building once it is complete. But for us to have a building that is going to offer daycare, first, I know they're going to offer it to their employees, but to the public as well, and then have programs and activities for our youth to do on that side of town. That is an exciting project. And just like the city has contributed to other projects in our area, such as the Shannon Library or STC, there may be ask for us from there as well. But first things first, you try to get money from the outside and see what you can get. And I feel real positive that we're going to be able to do that. And we're going to be able to do that for the STC expansion as well. We've talked to our lobbyists. We've talked to our friends through the state, and the expansion of the STC will help us create more healthcare programs that will allow for us to then train our employees that will work at the hospitals and then keep them here. We want to train them and keep them here. We don't want them to train them and then them go out of Northport. The goal is to keep them here. So there's a great symbiotic relationship between those 2 different community projects that will pay off its value back to our community hand over foot. So that's why we embrace our particular partners. And it's no secret that I want us to embrace our nonprofit partners even more, but that's a different story for a different day. But just know that we care about our nonprofits and we try to do the best we can within the constraints that we have, but we're not going to stop trying. Jane, I'm going to stop right there.
Great. Thank you, Jerome, for that insightful presentation on our financial growth. So we will open up now for questions and comments. Please remember, you can either use the raise your hand feature or use the chat box to ask a question. Now we'll give it a minute for questions. Okay. I am not seeing any questions at this time, but if you have any unanswered questions, I will put the email in the chat box. It is budgetinfo@NorthPortFL.gov. Please email us at any time if there are any questions that you would like to have staff answered about this topic. So thank you all for your active participation in today's community budget input meeting. The engagement here is crucial to shaping the future for our community. So as we conclude the session, I want to remind you that your involvement doesn't end here. For additional opportunities to contribute and stay informed, please visit NorthPortFL.gov/budget-input. There you will find resources such as other workshops, details about upcoming virtual and in-person meetings, as well as access to our budget tools. Again, if we were unable to address your question or if you have follow-up inquiries about this topic, please don't hesitate to reach out to us via email at budgetinfo@northportfl.gov, and we will make sure to answer your questions.
Thank you, Jane.
Thank you.